All right, let's get started. My name is Pooja Gupta. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Employee Center Academy. What you just saw in those slides was a very brief introduction for what is Employee Center and the capabilities that we offer. In this series, we essentially spend time with you, our customers, organizations who are deploying Employee Center to guide you with what features we are building, provide technical guidance on across your deployment journey and the bottlenecks and the challenges you will face, and also cover some topics that will help you guide to get better value out of your implementation. We do these monthly. The sessions are all recorded and available on YouTube. You can see some of the previous sessions that we have done, and I highly encourage you to please go access them because every month we pick a very small niche topic, but there is a series of other topics that we have done in past which you can benefit from. So please go and definitely look through those. Now, just some ground rules. We want you guys to engage with us. It was very good to see the engagement on the chat. It's amazing to see how many people have joined us from across the globe. So people from everywhere in different parts of the world, different weather conditions and everything. So really great to see that. This is a opportunity for you to interact with each other. Now, to help our panelists, please use the Q&A panel. You should see it in your Zoom controls at the bottom, a Q&A window where you can ask your questions. Throughout the session, we will be taking these questions and answering them live. We will try to spare some time towards the end to have a dedicated section on Q&A, but please don't wait for the end because we are taking them throughout the life, throughout the session. Please continue using the chat panel. So it's great to see all the greetings on this. But if you have comments, if you want to interact with one another, please do use the chat panel. We also have reactions. Feel free to use those. Engage with us is essentially one of the biggest rule for this Academy session. Don't worry about taking notes because we will share the session recording as well as the slide deck. And it does take the team a couple of days or so to get the recording and the slide deck out. So please wait and you will see the updates coming soon. All right. So our topic for today is a little bit more on the theoretical side. We are going to talk about how you can design an effective governance model for your employee center deployment or employee center portal. So we will dive deep into what are the different pieces of governance. We will also look into some examples of governance models that we have seen organizations who are doing well with Employee Center deploy. And then in the end, we will also share some quick wins. Joining with me are actually a set of experts coming from our impact team. They actually offer impact accelerators. So if you're an impact customer with ServiceNow, I'm sure you may have interacted with at least one of these panelists here. And they help you deploy Employee Center, get value from it. So Kevin, Sri, and Sienna, you want to just take a moment and say hi to the group and add to the introduction?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Zlonsik. I'm a technical portfolio manager. Um, just basic information. I've been here for about 7 years implementing HR or the HRSD solution, including Employee Center since its inception. So happy to be here. We'll be trying to answer questions along the way.
Right, I'll go next. Hello, everybody. My name is Sri Bandaram, a UX consultant on the Impact team here. I work at the intersection of user experience research and ServiceNow implementations. I've worked at ServiceNow for about 4 years now, and I've also been at an implementation partner before. So I bring a wealth of perspectives from both being at the company as well as implementing ServiceNow for different customers in different areas. Great to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Sienna Adams. I'm a UX consultant as well here at ServiceNow. I've been here for a little over 3 years. Before this, I was actually at a ServiceNow customer. Like Sri, I kind of work on that intersection between where UX meets Employee Center. I've helped customers and guided them through several Employee Center implementations, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. And as you can see, we have a lot of UX expertise. So if you want to have questions, specific questions around that, please feel free to ask those as well. All right. So let's get started by some understanding some of the concepts behind governance. Now, first things first, what is governance? We have heard people describe governance or use the term governance in many different forums, in many different ways. Some people think about it as an org structure. This is how I want to organize and govern my team. Some people think of it as set of principles. But essentially, the way we want to think about governance is that it is a decision-making framework. It is something that is um, it's a model that is dictating how decisions are being made when you are making those decisions. Who's involved in making those decisions? Who has the power to say yes or no, and also um, who's influencing those decisions? And last but not the least, how are those decisions made? Like, what is the process? What are the checks we are using? Are we using data or not? It's a little bit of an abstract term, governance, but it comes together as this model of the what, who, and how around decisions, critical business decisions in your organization. Now, why does it matter? It matters because it is essentially what defines your operating model. Now, again, operating model is another jargon term here, which people sometimes confused with um, org structures, but it's not that. It's essentially defining how we are working towards the same thing. How are we building alignment on organizational goals and visions? We are defining standards that dictate whether we are doing the things the right way. Are we taking into account for what we want to be in 5 years? So are we designing for today, or are we designing for scale such that we can meet our future needs? It it holds people accountable. If without governance, it's like a wild wild west, and everyone is doing whatever they want, and there is no accountability, there is no ownership. Governance and how you are building the governance across different teams defines the accountability and allows people to have that space to take ownership and have that clarity of who owns what so they can collaborate better. And then, last but not the least, if you're not governing, can never know whether you are actually realizing the benefits. Are you really meeting the goals that you had set up in the very beginning? You don't know what is the bottleneck for innovation. So a lot of people are actually moving, and then they're like, we don't know what's happening, like it's out of control, and we want to take a step back and like organize all of these different things that we are trying to do. So it's an afterthought. But if you're in the beginning of a journey thinking about what is the governance structure that I need to do for keeping these four different things that we have on the right hand side of the slide in mind, how this governance structure will evolve as we grow is a critical question that should not be left for the time when you actually have um, things falling apart. Kevin, you want to add anything, or Sri, Sienna, on like why it is important to focus on governance?
I think you touched on it a little bit of just having a structure in place to allow for requests or demands of whether it be innovation or features that your organization wants to deploy, and having a structured way to be able to evaluate it and ensure that that gets implemented to solve a use case that your organization is trying to solve. If you really take a look at and you just take every demand, you don't put scrutiny to it, you don't look at the technical configuration of it, and have a team that's ensuring that whatever you're deploying, you're potentially going to be chasing yourself on that configuration if you didn't take the steps in order to ensure it was accurate, it was actually going to solve a problem. And then the last point you hit was the goals, is why are you doing it, what are you trying to accomplish from that, so you can measure to ensure that the effort you put forth and the capability you deployed truly does meet a use case, and you can measure the success and the benefit of deploying that capability.
Yeah, excellent points from Kevin. To add on to that, from a user experience perspective as well, when we first launched an Employee Center portal and it works really well, about a year or two down the line, without a solid governance or standards in place, content can get really viral really fast, which negatively impacts user experience from in many different areas, findability, uh, content organization, content types, etc. So it's very important to have a solid structure in place. So when you get to adding new items or updating new items, there is a sense to doing it.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, let's take this concept of governance and apply it in Employee Center. So, what are the decisions that you will probably have to think about when you're governing Employee Center? So, there are four key buckets. Let's start with the first one, experience management. You all are pretty familiar. If you are deploying Employee Center or Employee Center Pro, it comes with a lot of capabilities. Your organization may or may not be ready for all of those. So, which ones are most important for your organizations to invest in? We do come up with a out of box homepage design, but what is the design that your users want? How do you ensure consistency when you're moving from one page to the other page? How do you decide whether a content that one of your stakeholder wants to put on the portal should be a knowledge article, should it be a topic page, maybe even a rich topic page with microsite components on it, or should it be something else? That is all part of what we say experience management. The element in this is very strong. Actually, it's strong in all three, but the here is where you would see the most visual piece of it. Second is, you may have 20,000 knowledge articles, like probably many thousands of catalog items. How do you organize all this content? And Employee Center gives you a lot of different capabilities to do that. For example, you could have topic pages which are tied with taxonomy. You could have, you could just probably invest in search. So there are many different things. And how do you build that information architecture that is right for your organization? Now, as you are working with multiple different departments trying to build a unified experience on Employee Center, you will see that everybody wants to be on that front end, right? You know, everybody wants their topic to be front and central in the mega menu on the Employee Center. How do you decide which one is the right one to pick? So, um, these are all critical decisions. How do you make sure the browse experience that you have created based on decisions you took aligns with the search experience? So it's not that, you know, when someone is browsing and then moving to search, they are lost. So again, information architecture is again an important piece, and that really dictates the experience that a user is getting. If they can't find the things that they need, no matter how good your design is, they're going to be lost and not be able to get value from the portal. The third piece here is content management. Now, you're all building content for people to self serve. Are you sure that you are building the content in a relevant way? Do you need to localize that content? Are you making sure right people have the right kind of access? So I'm not seeing a bunch of different articles that are not relevant to me. Are you ensuring consistency in quality? Is the content regularly updated, or actually I'm reading a policy that is 5-year old and not even applicable today? And then when it comes to communications, are you building and effectively managing those communications? Are you inundating the user with tens of different communications going out? And how do you control who can communicate on what and what pages emphasize on what kind of different communications? If you're building an intranet on Employee Center, which many of our customers are, what goes on the homepage? What goes on the news page? What goes somewhere else? These are all important decisions that are actually made by having an effective governance. Now, all these three pillars actually are sitting on top of another set of practice which is very key to governance is your ability to track and report metrics. If, like a lot of you just start with some very basic metrics, but what you should really look for is as you think about all these different decisions that you have to make in managing the experience, managing the information architecture and content, what are the real metrics that you need? That is for just managing the portal. If you start working with your business stakeholders, which we will talk about very quickly, you would also need metrics for measuring ROI. Now, Sri and Sienna, you're both very deep in user experience design. What is the impact of actually missing asking these questions in the right way in the design that you end up with?
Such a good question. I think I was alluding to this in my previous comment as well, but let's say a customer deploys a brand new employee center and all the metrics from that initial launch are pointing to the right direction. Everything's good. One of the biggest complaints I see from customers about a year or two in is that the site becomes too complicated to handle. Users are unable to find the topics that they previously used to. Content has been added in such a haphazard way that there is a lot of struggle to even do self-service, which increases the volume of tickets coming in. So, not paying attention to some of these things that you're talking about here and not creating a plan to effectively govern across these three pillars leads to employee frustration and eventually increases all the pain points that you were initially set out to solve. Something that I've noticed with a lot of requests that come into my team as well around a lack of governance. Anything else you'd like to add to this, Yana?
Yeah, and then from the business perspective, something that I see a lot is if you don't prioritize these things up front, what we see is customers, I think you touched on this a little bit, Sri, down the road, a year or 2 years out, deal with a lot of rework, whether it's from technical debt or like you talked about, Sri, just a miss with the user. So rolling something out and it's not resonating with users or users are unable to find what they're looking for in the portal, not
Mhm.
not able to find results and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you both. Now, we have spoken about why it is important, what are the key decisions. One thing that I want all of you to walk away with from this session is that there is no magic wand around governance. There is no one size fits all. There is no best practice in governance. Your governance model needs to be based on your organizational need. It needs to meet your organization culture and should be at the level of your organizational maturity. Now, many of you actually start by phase one or phase two, um, sorry, phase zero or phase one, and they start moving towards phase three. Now, um, yeah, so sorry, phase two. I'm going to use different words. They all start by not being aware of governance and the importance of governance. You're now resolving that. Now you understand that it is important. um, don't don't be in phase one where governance become a pain point and then you start working towards resolving it. What we want you to do is actually jump a leap and be at what we define as phase three, which is you proactively establish teams and ownership models that help you govern better. And once you are over there, you can start slowly moving towards a little bit more managed and effective governance model. But what the governance structure really looks like is a journey, and you will have to define what works for you. We will share some examples. We will share about like what are the key components of it. Keep those in mind, but don't just try to replicate things that you will see here in our conversation as well, because it will not work. You will have to design what works for you.
And I think important part is if you don't have a governance structure in place today, that is okay. The phases of stepstoning to phase 5 are important to lay the groundwork, set the foundation, and get a clear understanding of where you want to go with the governance model, especially if you don't have governance across the platform. Uh, Setting that in stone or setting that in place is going to take some time to do it. So start small, ensure that you have the foundation, and allow yourself to grow into that. Being able to turn over a full governance model on day one or in a quick time frame may be daunting and huge task to take on. So if you take it in bite-sized pieces, it allows you to really grow into what you want to be, and you by setting the expectation of what that governance model will do will allow you to then grow at the pace that your organization can maintain.
Absolutely. Couldn't argue with that, Kevin. That is super important takeaway. Now, if you want to be inundated with a really mature governance model from a ServiceNow platform perspective, here is what it would look like. This is a full, like, which is what we have seen a ServiceNow platform. Note, this is not portal governance, this is the platform governance at its maturity. So let's look at the blue boxes, the blue dotted boxes. You have an executive steering board. They are looking into setting the platform vision, they're managing risk, they're resolving escalations, they're overseeing business objectives and value realization from the portal. They're constantly looking into the ROI. There is a demand board, which is on the bottom left side, which is looking into, what improvements we want to make, what we want to build in terms of capabilities, what is our backlog, what can we actually deliver, who do we need to work with to deliver those. So they all work with that. Then there is a technical governance who is looking into more of actually the technical debt of building these capabilities that the demand board is looking at. Um, and then all of these governance boards are working with a set of different stakeholders and roles, which cut across teams that are represented on ServiceNow. So if you are one of our more mature customers, you probably have IT, HR, GRC, and that is global risk and compliance. You are doing some sort of custom workflow, which we call citizen development and app engine. So there's and more. In fact, this is only a small set of different products that we have in ServiceNow. You have all these different teams building and running their whole business on ServiceNow. They're all feeding the demand funnel, and they're feeding the technical team with like requests for customizations and whether they would serve their needs and all. On top, there is another platform team which is now looking into whether we are delivering on these demands in the right way. So there's an OCM person who is managing change at the platform level. There's a business analyst who's looking into ROI and making sure we're doing in the right way. There's a person who is looking into the strategy, that's the platform owner, keeping in touch with ServiceNow to understand how ServiceNow itself is innovating. There is somebody who is managing the platform architecture. There's someone who is driving innovation. There's a lot that's going on. Now, bear in mind, this is at the platform level. So this I'm sharing because it gives you a picture of what are the different possible roles that you could have when you're thinking about a really robust governance model. Now, when you would have to build governance for your portal, you're looking this as an example and looking into how we can tailor it down to do something of similar with employee center. Now, this is a good example for employee center also because Employee Center is unifying the front end experience across all these portals, product teams, apologies. So essentially, your set of stakeholders are almost as wide as the set of stakeholders that the ServiceNow platform team has. But the only difference is you're looking from just the experience layer. So you will still, if you have, if you're building a unified experience that cuts across the ServiceNow platform, you will still be working with IT, you will still be working with HR, you will still be working with all these different stakeholders. They will all have demands. They will all have customization requests, and this provides a really good framework to see what good could look like. I'm going to take this a step down and show what it could be for Employee Center. So that was a really busy visual. Let me simplify it. So there are four key components of your governance, and I like to call them boards over here. For Employee Center, you can call them committees, you can call them teams, you can call them steering groups, any of that. But for this context, I'm right now saying them boards. So first is your executive steering board or executive steering committee. This is essentially your executive sponsors. If you're just a single department, that's your IT leader or HR leader or whatever leader that single department is. If it is IT and HR, it's probably a combination of IT and HR leadership. So um, if you have an employee experience lead in your organization, this is where the employee experience lead could also sit. So this is your identified executive sponsor for Employee Center project. Now, this leadership will work with what we call the demand board, or you could also say the owners of the portal. Now, in many organizations, we have seen it to be like a separate person who is the owner, or a team who's the owner of the portal, who is managing the portal. Their job is to manage the portal. And then the demand board is co-led by departmental leads of the departments represented in the portal. So if it is HR, IT, communications, there are leads from that who are kind of managing or co-chairing the demand board. Now, what is the demand board doing? Similar to how we were discussing in the ServiceNow platform governance, they are working with the technical governance board, which is again the design lead, the development lead, the research lead, who is defining what capabilities we want. And they are continuously sharing with demand board, saying, let's say they say, oh, our page load is too high. We kind of have to build these capabilities, and it's important because that will take down our page load significantly. So we kind of have to prioritize that. They might be even saying we are not getting great feedback from our users on the information architecture that we have designed, so we need to change. So they are more focused on like how, we are like, are we getting the value out of what we have delivered and how we need to evolve or change. The demand board is also sitting with somebody who is managing the day to day of the content. So this could be your communications lead, it could be your knowledge owners, it can also be your service owners. So for organizations that have really deep service management practices, typically your service owners would sit here because they are providing the self-service content that sits on the portal and are actually defining their needs on how they want to surface the content up, how do they want to make it relevant, and that is all feeding again back to the demand board. Now, users, this is a very important piece and often something that people miss out on. They are providing feedback. The feedback is coming in two different ways. One is actually three different ways. One is when the researchers and the designers are actually going one on one with the users, asking them what their experience is, how much value they are getting out of it. So that's the research study. Users are also giving feedback directly on the platform via your feedback capabilities, feedback forms, thumbs up, thumbs down, and any of those capabilities that you may have implemented. And remember, Employee Center does offer those. And the third piece is metrics. Without asking your users, you actually can track how much time users are spending on each page. Where do they go to get to a certain knowledge article? Do they start from homepage? Do they start go to a topic page from there and get to a knowledge article? Do they search directly? So the user behavior is a very, very important piece of feedback. And we have very strong capabilities for user experience analytics where you can actually collect that feedback in terms of real data. Let me pause here and ask and our panelists to chime in on both, like, what we saw from a ServiceNow platform governance perspective and how we are trying to simplify it, and anything that you would want to add to clarify.
So, and the portal, when you look at the governance of overall platform governance model, Pooja on the couple screens before, don't want you to go back. When we looked at the operating model, we saw HRSD and IT as kind of individual buckets. I do see Employee Center being one of those buckets in themselves. So you have your team that's working on it. You've got a demand team that walks through that configuration. To really ensure that you have someone looking at this application. EC in itself is really the front face or the facelift of other applications, but it is truly an application that needs to be managed on its own in order to make sure you're really looking at it across all of your enterprise applications you have within the platform. And so it's important to ensure that you are getting feedback from all of the departments, all of the different avenues that are going to actually end up using and illustrate or present their information within the portal. A thing that you also mentioned was around metrics. There are some pretty powerful dashboards out there using user experience analytics that will allow you to take a look at how your portal is functioning, what people are doing within the portal. And that is a great gauge to understand where the traffic is. How can you use that metrics to understand where you put your time at? And so if you see a page is being heavily used, you may want to consider ensuring you're refreshing that page, ensuring the configuration is solid. If you've created a page, let's say you created a microsite that isn't getting the traction that you expected, how do you advertise that page out there and take a look to see how do you get that more presentable to your teammates? Using those metrics really can help gauge what does the future development look like and help you prioritize the demand you may have in your backlog.
I love that answer, Kevin. I also wanted to say ServiceNow as a platform provides a lot of valuable data points for you to really understand how well your employee center is performing. Something that goes hand in hand with that is qualitative research or speaking directly to your users. When you observe something either through feedback or through analytics, it's worth validating with real users of your employee center uh, and to provide a good framework around what that means in terms of a pain point for your users. So combining quantitative metrics that you're learning from your platform and qualitative information that you can glean from having direct conversations with users or user panels is a very valuable way to informing your future governance strategies and your approach to governing your portal.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's take a step deep into each of these and look into what are the kind of decisions or things that they're looking at. And this will really help you, like everyone has been talking about, thinking about your metrics. So executive steering board, it your sponsors or leadership is where they are involved. Now, their key responsibilities are strategic alignment. Typically, if you would see a really organization which has many different departments coming in, they're always talking about, what whether they have a commonly understood set of goals and deliverables that they are trying to meet as an organization. It's not what IT wants, what HR wants, what risk wants. It's about what we want as an organization. And that strategic alignment needs to come from the steering board. They're also looking on return on investments. Now, each of these departments have many other alternatives that they could potentially use. There are many, many point solutions that are there in in the market. So you have to constantly think about whether you are getting the return on investment by being on a unified experience, and remind people, track those your return on investment, and be on the same page that here's why we are doing what we are doing. For many organizations, it's actually painful to work together in the beginning because they've never done that before. All of these departments that are now represented on a unified experience have worked in silos for years. So, making sure you are strategically aligned and focusing on the return on investment will really ensure that you're all on the same page. Budget is important. Every organization is struggling with it, has to prioritize, reprioritize, and all that is important. And then they're also looking into what kind of adoption we are getting. Are we getting the reach? Are we having engagement? Are we mitigating the risk? Are we innovating for future? Those are all there. But the first three things are super critical: strategic alignment, return on investment, and making sure we are putting the right budget allocations for the projects that we need. The demand board, which again is portal owners. I saw somebody saying that there was a functional group that manages the governance. More likely you're thinking about something like a demand board. And they are looking into how we can make sure that all our stakeholders that are represented are on the portal are satisfied. They make sure that there is cross-port coordination, so they are not, fulfilling demand coming from one side but not from the other side. So they play a really critical role in bringing balance in the way they are governing. They are, of course, managing the request and backlog. They have a process in assigning priority. They're looking into how many of these demands we are approving versus pushing back, like how big our backlog is. They're again looking into some of the key metrics like adoption, engagement, whether there is improvements in the ROI that the executive committee is looking. They're looking into how do we measure it in terms of productivity improvements or dollar savings. So this is often what gets deemed as our governance board, but they don't work in isolation. You kind of have to think about the other stakeholders as well. Now, the technical governance board is again somebody, like, most people don't always think of governance, and they think of these people as being involved when we are designing or building the portal, and then they go away and probably come back when there is like a need to redesign everything. But it shouldn't be the case. They should be constantly involved. And after I finish this, I would love to get Sienna, your and Sri, your thought to like, talk about this role of UX research and design to be a constant part of the governance board. Because I've often seen that many times the research and design is done by a partner and then they go away and then the team is lost. So you kind of have to keep a tab on this and actually continuously invest in it. Now, what are they looking at? They're looking at performance. They are looking at technical debt that we have created. They're looking into the technical pieces like security, compliance, scalability. But I want to get your thoughts on the last, like, I want to get your attention towards the last two sides, the change management aspect. How much of, like, as you are updating the capabilities, are you managing change for your users? Are you managing change for your providers, like the admins who are working on building the experience, the content managers? So there is change for both, and are we managing that in the right way? The user experience that we are creating, it's not that you should only invest in user experience research when things break down. It is a constant evolution. So it's this is a very important piece. And let me pause here. I would love to get thoughts from our panelists from this one.
Yeah, and I mentioned kind of in the comments a little bit about this is having a dedicated team that truly understands the capabilities and the configuration of Service Portal is extremely important. Having the skill set there, Employee Center is I wouldn't say difficult, but it is slightly different than maybe ITSM or HRSD, where you're looking at lists and forms. The Employee Center does incorporate a little bit more of CSS and JavaScript and some of those things to help really tailor that experience to be unique to your organization. And so having the right team in place that could speak to what is the use case and then translate that into actual configuration of capabilities will allow you to use more of the out of the box capabilities versus maybe going down a custom route or building something that your organization will have to maintain on a go forward approach. I see a lot of times when, let's say, an IT department is managing the employee center and they don't have a resource that has the skill set or the knowledge around Service Portal. There tends to be a lot of spinning of the wheels of understanding what could you do and trying to um, upskill yourself in the midst of understanding the capabilities. And so, the really the whole point around this technical board is having a soundboard that can review the demand, whether you use stories or however you intake that demand, and then like I mentioned, translate that into this is the configuration we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. And ultimately, as we mentioned before, is getting a good sense of when we do this, how are we going to measure that? If we're going to implement, let's say, virtual agent onto the EC, we're hoping that that's going to increase self-deflection of cases, which will ultimately reduce maybe the amount of tier one cases that you're going to get regarding it because you're going to allow virtual agent to look at it. So then you would make a measure to say, did by doing virtual agent 6, 12 months down the road, did we see a decretion of those incidents or those HR cases, whatever the case may be, in order to say that yes, the effort that we put forth on that particular capability did actually warrant or reflect some type of benefit to the organization.
Thank you, Kevin. I've like
And
just to go ahead, Sri.
oh, I was going to say, I really love your call out here about the reactionary nature sometimes of conducting research. Only when things go bad is when you're trying to figure out why and to fix it. The best companies that I've seen that do an excellent job with their employee center learn from their users on a more continuous basis, like you mentioned. Even if it's a very low barrier to entry, like Sienna was mentioning in the chat here, you don't need a dedicated UX resource. All you need to do is have dedicated time to learning how well your portal is performing and where some of those roadblocks are. It goes a long way into informing that demand or like filling up your demand backlog.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Sri.
back to you, Pooja. Yeah.
Yep. And one of the best ways that I've seen that happen is by having a set of champions identified or your power users. And they are your constant feed of, user experience research coming in from all the different stakeholders that they speak with. All right. So just going ahead in the interest of time, um, the third piece is your content board. These are actually your content managers. They are the ones who are building content, and we often use like treat them as like people who are adding to it, but they are also part of the governance because you have to constantly hear them out on how difficult or easy it is to manage content. Are they getting the engagement on the content? Are they getting the visibility on the content, and so on? So think about these as well. I'm not going to go super deep into the key responsibilities here, but one of the interesting tactics that I've seen at a customer is that they had dashboards where they could track like, how frequently a content is being refreshed, and they actually had a friendly competition across their different stakeholders in how well they are managing the content. So another set of stakeholders that you would want to work with. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight, these are all different types of stakeholders or your different governance boards. Now, this is not your model. You could have all these different departments or boards of governance centralized to one team. You could even have it decentralized. So everybody does their own thing. They manage their demand in a different way. You've given distributed ownership and do it in however they want. The most effective ones that we have seen are actually hybrid. So we recommend that. But again, depending on your organizational need, your organizational context, you may choose to be centralized or decentralized as well. The important piece is you understand the pros and cons. Maybe in the beginning, you want your governance to be straightforward. You want it to be a little bit more top down than really, cumulative and social. So you want centralized. But often what happens is there are not enough cooks in the kitchen, and you have a bottleneck. The central team becomes a bottleneck and can limit innovation because they're not very close to the ground realities. Whereas in decentralized, it gives too much autonomy and it like leads to everyone who wants to be the head chef, and then now you have a buffet which doesn't align with each other. So that doesn't work as well. It becomes very difficult to govern, and you actually are not really able to coordinate. So there's no real governance in that case. So sometimes too much decentralization is also not good. But having a hybrid model, you essentially have a central team that is defining the guardrails for what is the level of flexibility that is available, and is still giving that flexibility to their stakeholders to operate and do the things that they want within those guardrails. So that is effective, but can take time to reach there. Now, let's look at some of the example structures. Again, these are just examples and also depend on where you are in your maturity. So, yeah, first one, very simple structure. If you have this is very similar to our boards. So there is one which is content collaboration board. So if you have too many different stakeholders, you could have leads of for content in across different departments, and this board comes together by actually having representatives from each department sitting in for content collaboration. You could even have it if you're a very centralized and content is managed all by a single team. It's again like that team. There is a technical governance. These are often if the departmental leads of different pieces, different departments, and they're coming together to discuss features, enhancements, requests, and looking into more holistically what they're trying to achieve. And last but not the least is your steering committee. So essentially, you are saying, irrespective of whether we are single department or multi-department, we're going to form three boards, and these are the three boards, and this is how frequently they will meet. This is who will attend, and this is what they will discuss. Very, very simple structure, easy to start with. But again, if you don't have collaboration and you're trying to do a multi department portal delivery, this can also be difficult. This one has no dependency on how well you do your service portal, service platform governance, and can be run independently because this is very much just designed with portal in mind. Now, let's say you do have very strong and mature ServiceNow practice. In that case, your governance structure may be a little bit more complex and look something like this. Over here, there is a steering committee for ServiceNow. There is a center of excellence and innovation for service platform. And then, like how Kevin was saying, the portal or the mobile experiences that you're building becomes like its own thing. It becomes like a platform, a product team that the platform team is working with. So it's its own product, just like HRSD, just like ITSM would be on ServiceNow platform. Um, this is again applicable if you have a little bit more mature ServiceNow practice. Even in this case, you still need a content management function. So that's a often ignored side of it, but you do need to invest in like managing content, especially with Gen AI. If you have really bad content, your Gen AI is going to spit out bad content, like garbage in, garbage out. So managing your content is super important. Now, there are organizations which are really complex. Like they are multi-brand. There are, like there's one brand on top and there are multiple, like, you can think of like a Disney. Disney has ESPN, and there are many other brands that, are within Disney umbrella brands. So they're all like operating as independent entities. There are other organizations like Deloitte, where, again, each location is its own independent entity. For organizations like that, maybe a governance structure like this would work better. There is a single product team, but there is what we call an advisory group. And we call it advisory group because they are not dictating what the final product should be. They're more like advisors. There is an employee voice group because, again, like, the employee voice might be different for different departments or brands. And then there is an engineering group. So this is a slightly different way of thinking. Ultimately, they're achieving the same things, but it's just a different way of organizing and structuring your governance. I'm going to quickly cover the quick wins and then we can pause further for questions. Um, all right. So we shared a lot. There were a lot of nuggets passed on the chat as well by our panelists. So could be could be too much to gain, but if there were a few things that you could start with, they're actually mentioned here. First and foremost, you need to understand who are your key stakeholders. You can't do anything that we spoke about today if you don't have a really good understanding of who your key stakeholders are and what decisions they influence. Are they more on the content side? Are they more on the goals and vision side? Are they more on like, hey, fulfill this capability for my department side? So you need to identify that and understand that dynamics. You need to have a declared portal owner. Many organizations that we have seen, there is like no clear ownership. It's not clear who owns it. You need to have that. Otherwise, you will never be able to form a good demand board. The other thing is you need to understand what level of access controls you have provided in the portal. So if you are familiar with Employee Center and its capabilities, we actually allow distributed ownership of pages. We allow distributed ownership of content types that you can publish in different places, audiences that you can publish. There's a lot of different distributed ownership that you can actually do in the system to manage various parts of the portal. Verify how you are using that. Fourth one here is that you should actually document and document the experience and content design guidelines. So when you built that portal, you actually had a design in mind. Document it. Share it with your stakeholders and content managers. This one is especially important in forming that content management board. Now, build a cadence of meetings. If you think about the three-tier structure, just have a cadence defined. Like we will review our goals in this time frame. We will review content in this much time frame, and we will do our demand or like backlog verification at this time frame. So it's really important. And last but not the least, track relevant metrics. So start with metrics, any sort of metrics. So hopefully this gave you a good set of things that you could start doing today. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Now, we do have a lot of content. We shared our community site on chat, and we also shared our past academy sessions. We conduct office hours where you could come and join us for Q&A. Happy to take Q&A on the governance questions. And last but not the least, we do share our roadmap webinars. In the interest of time, I'm going to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to our panelists for sharing your expertise and helping us with the Q&A. And thank you, everyone. We will see you again next month. Our next topic is going to be unified task experience. That's a little bit more technical. We will go deep into how tasks are managed on the Employee Center portal. So, all right. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.